Today, we're looking at Delta Blue. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you're in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Platinum 3776 with a broad nib, wrote with it for a day, and took my notes for this video. In order to have some standardization, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in the first writing samples, although there is an additional writing sample with different papers later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone than we got with the 1.1 with no feather, spread, halo sheen. There is some light shading that goes on throughout it, like the letter K is a little bit darker than the rest of Quick. B and the R in brown then it gets a little bit lighter from there. Jump starts nice and light and works its way a little bit darker, but that's about it. 6 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It offers about the same kind of shading that we see with the extra fine. Think I missed the 6 seconds to dry. About the same type of shading that we get with the extra fine. The U, I in Quick is darker than the letters around it. The left side of the B and the R look a little bit darker than the rest of brown. The X is darker than the rest of Fox. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation, and we got plenty. Looking at Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It has a definite halo all the way around, all of it. Where I had someone asking last year about halo, so let's see if we can zoom way in and get I don't think I can get it to focus. It's the best I get right there. Where you see the nice darker lines all the way around all of the writing, that's what the halo looks like. It's very nice. It really helps your writing stand out, especially if the ink you're using is a bit lighter, like this one is. No sheen. Some shading throughout the writing, as you were able to see when it was nice and close up. The top of the E, the top of the L are a bit darker than the rest of the word Delta. The right side of the E in blue is a little bit darker than the rest of blue. The extra fine is a bit lighter than what we got with the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does offer some light shading throughout, just some darker spots, like the R in brown. 9 is darker than the word seconds. The X in Fox. 9 seconds to dry. The medium is slightly darker than the extra fine, but not as dark as the stub, with no feather, no spread, some haloing in darker areas. So on brown, when it's darker on the B and darker on the N, we also get some haloing. But when it's lighter on the W, there's no halo there. So there is some haloing available. It comes with the shading in the darker spots. You do start to see it. So on jumps, it shows up on the P, but not on the J. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both, if you look far left to far right, the medium shows more shading than the extra fine, but they both showed about the same amount of shading within the writing sample. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. Got to fix my distance here from the camera. There we go, my focus distance. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, boy, this is going to just be a messy video for you guys watching because I keep having to jiggle the camera to fix some of the focus. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does offer some one darker spot at the top of the L in blue is a little bit darker than the letters around it. The extra fine is lighter than the 1.1 with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no real shading, 6 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine, but not as dark as the stub. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no real shading. There's spots, but not really shading within the writing. Like the K in quick is darker than the B in brown, but there's not a whole lot going on here. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us more color variation than we actually got in the writing sample. I agree with Vita that there's a lot to be learned by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is there's a line of blue that very immediately has seeped into this filter paper, making you pretty impressed with how quick it goes in, because I don't think of Delta inks as being permanent. But a nice light blue works its way up. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that blue line across the bottom, much darker, much more there, really does make me think it might have an ability to stay around. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, everything I thought based on the chromatography, I'm wrong. That highlighter is disappeared. You practically can't even see that something was written. So don't use this unless you want to make your notes go bye-bye. Water is reactivating and starting to lift all this ink off. It just hasn't gotten it quite with that 30 seconds. If you look at the very bottom edge, you start to see the white of the paper coming through, which makes me say that water is all that you would need. However, it is possible that you might need something more like pen flush. Now, pen flush did completely remove it from the paper. Without a doubt, it's obliterating it. So if water doesn't do it, pen flush will absolutely remove it from your pen. And the 1/3 bleach solution, even though there's no need, yes, it does obliterate it from the paper. I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I've linked that video and put that in here for you. Now for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Delta's blue has a viscosity of 2.53, making it normal and really close to average. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Delta's blue has an average dry time of 10 seconds, making it a faster drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Delta Blue, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted a nice red, really a dusty red, like Birmingham's Bloomfield red. The second writing sample is on Northbooks, Field Notes, and Leuchtturm 1917 notebooks. Now here we're going to look at what happens on Northbooks paper. Now, Northbooks papers had a lot of trouble finding inks that perform well. Well, we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade, but it's a nice dark blue there, especially in comparison to the other writings. The extra fine is significantly lighter than the 1.1 with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shading, 2 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather, spread, halo sheen, and a couple of spots of shading, like the K in quick is a little darker, the E in the S in jumps, the D in dog, the 2, all a little bit darker than the writing around it, and 2 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us much more color variation than we actually get in the writing sample. Field Notes, another paper that has trouble with fountain pen ink. This is not a bleed or that's a transfer from a page underneath. We have no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade. It's just a blue. Just blue. The extra fine is slightly lighter than the 1.1 with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. It only took 1 second to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 1 second to dry again. The thing we get is that we get different tones from the stub than we do the extra fine or the medium, which means you could adjust your tone of ink based on your nib and flow. Now, the scrubby for both shows more color variation than we got in the writing sample. Leuchtturm, 1917 notebook. No bleeding, no ghosting. Nice dark blue with the stub with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is significantly lighter than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 7 seconds to dry. Very usable for a walk-around notebook. Medium, significantly darker than the extra fine, just a little lighter than the stub. It had no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 16 seconds to dry. Again, the scrubby for both shows us plenty of color variation that we're really not getting in the writing sample. And that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Delta Blue? This is by far too light a blue for me to be very happy with. I just felt left out of the conversation. I don't know how else to say that. So what pen and nib will give you the best writing experience? I preferred it the most out of a very wet stub nib. Get a lot of ink down, make it nice and wide. It's the only way that I found this rather acceptable. I didn't care a lot for it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I'm going to remind you, if you enjoyed it, subscribe. Thanks for watching.